irony of it all is that on the one hand, these proponents are suggesting that an individual and a woman does not have the right to end an unwanted pregnancy, and on the other hand, does not have the right to become pregnant if that is her choice and her desire and her dream.
That was Vice President Kamala Harris on the Alabama ruling that declared embryos have the same rights as living children. She joins President Biden in expressing outrage at the fact that doctors who provide in vitro fertilization could now face wrongful death lawsuits. According to NBC News, the White House is now discussing legal and political options to protect the procedure nationwide. The chair of the Gender Policy Council for the White House, Jennifer Klein, joins us now.
Thank you for being here, Jennifer. What are some of those legal and political options? I mean, from our NBC News reporting, our colleague Ali Rafa notes that there are discussions happening, but there is caution within the White House, and I think from allies outside of the White House, that the executive action that the president could take is limited as it relates specifically to IVF.
Well, I would say that the president has been quite clear. The vice president has been quite clear. I, sadly, have been quite clear since the day the Dobbs decision came down that a fundamental constitutional right was taken away from American women, from American people. And what we are seeing across the country, most recently, the action that the Alabama Supreme Court has taken is a direct consequence of that. We've also been quite clear that the only way to restore the protection that people lived with for nearly 50 years under Roe is a federal law that would restore those protections. And that's what we've been fighting for, and we will continue to fight for. Absolutely, there are things that the administration can and has done already. The president's issued 3 executive orders and a presidential memorandum to protect access to abortion and contraception, to protect patients' privacy, to protect the right to travel, and to protect, for example, the right to medication abortion, which, as you know, is more than 50% of abortions in this country. And we will continue to look for ways to protect access and to protect women's health, protect women's access to emergency health. The list goes on. It's sort of, you can't imagine what's happening across the country, the devastating consequences that have, not surprisingly, but followed from the overturning of the Supreme Court decision in Roe versus Wade. And we will continue to take whatever action we can. But I also think it's really important to keep in mind that the most important thing we have to do, is to pass a federal law, which the president has been quite clear he will sign, to restore the fundamental protections that existed for nearly 50 years under Roe versus Wade.
During Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearing, she was repeatedly pressed on this question of IVF. I want you to take a listen to what she said, and then we'll talk about it.
The legal position, IVF treatment, criminalizing it, would it be constitutional?
I've repeatedly said, as has every other nominee who sat in this seat, that we can't answer questions in the abstract. That would have to be decided in the course of the judicial process.
Well, we are potentially no longer talking about this question in the abstract.
Absolutely. And I think, again, you need to look at people's actions. The Republicans in Alabama and across the country are sort of scrambling right now to fix this problem. Well, if we had Roe versus Wade, we wouldn't be trying to fix this problem. If we had federal legislation that guaranteed the right to abortion across the country, we wouldn't have to fix this problem. And I think, what you see is that the vast majority of people, Republicans included, support the right to in vitro fertilization. I mean, take a step back, right? Women in this country are being denied access to emergency rooms when they're in the middle of having an emergency, whether that's whether they need an abortion or they're having a miscarriage, and they are being turned away. They're being forced to travel to other states to seek legal medical care.
Have women who are shipping their frozen embryos to other states because they're afraid that what happened in Alabama is going to happen in their state.
That is exactly right. And now we are faced in Alabama, and, as you just said, women in other states across the country are also incredibly nervous. But what just happened in Alabama is that fertility clinics are now closed. they're unsure what to do. And this is, these are people who who desperately want a family, who desperately want a child, and now are unsure if that is legal to do in their state.
Madam Chair, I don't want to get you, Steve, too deep in the politics of this because you're a policy person and you're kind of looking at the impacts of public policy on the lives of men and women around the country, especially with respect to gender. But there is a political element here that's important for the administration to consider, given that, to Alicia's point, that women are now being put in positions to make draconian decisions about their own health. Okay, do I take the bus and drive 100 miles to get health care? Do I move my embryos to another state to protect them? What is the thinking, the White House, as it gets ready to engage on this issue politically in this election, to sort of frame these narratives that both Alicia and Simone have sort of set out here on our table, that are real life stories for women? Because my experience in conversations since Dobbs, and I think this is something that a lot of white Republican men need to get their heads around. There are a lot of Republican women who do not stand with them on this issue. A lot of, self-proclaimed pro-life women don't stand with them. In fact, we have polling, which we discussed, that shows 83% of evangelicals do not support this IVF position. Politically, what is the conversation that the administration wants to have with women and men, regardless of their position on the broader question of life, but specifically on the impact, health and otherwise, that this issue has?
Well, I would add to your exactly right list of statistics there that, the vast majority of Americans, men and women, thought that Roe was rightly decided and didn't think Roe should have been overturned. And a really strong majority of people, again, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, believe that we should have a federal law protecting the ability of people to make these very personal medical decisions themselves. I would say the problem, what you just said was people are forced to make these difficult medical decisions. I actually think the problem is the opposite, which is those decisions are being taken out of their hands and being made for them. And that's exactly what our administration, the Biden-Harris administration, is fighting to restore. These are the most personal medical decisions, personal family decisions that people can make, whether that's to have a child or to not have a child. And those are the decisions that should be left to people. And, I think that what's been really interesting across this country is that when people have had the opportunity to make their voices heard, you've seen ballot initiatives in states as diverse as California, of course, Michigan, Ohio, Kansas, Kentucky, the gamut of political.
And they've succeeded and survived.
Every single one.
Everywhere abortion has been on the ballot. Look, Jen, what is the White House's strategy in terms of convening? Obviously, the vice president has really been at the forefront leading on this issue. She's on a national tour, Fight for Our Freedoms tour, I think is what it's called. In the aftermath of the Dobbs decision, you all invited the folks who are most affected, directly affected by the Dobbs decision from that Mississippi, from that clinic to the White House. Are we going to see convenings like that in the coming weeks as it relates to this in Alabama?
Yes, you will. Very soon.
How soon?
We will very soon, Simone. What I will say is we're going to continue to do what we have been doing, and the vice president really has taken the lead on this since the Dobbs decision came down. She's met, she's been to 20 states. She's met with 250 state legislators. The president's met with 10 governors, just weeks after the Dobbs decision came down. And those have been really productive working meetings where we are trying to help states figure out what they can do, because they are certainly on the front lines of this, and they're trying to help each other. And what we've heard from those convenings is that real work and real progress has come from that, sharing strategies, sharing tactics, literally. So we will continue to do that. And you will see, of course, the vice president continue her reproductive freedoms tour, but also, more of these roll up your sleeves meetings, as I call them.
All right. Well, we hope to see the roll up your sleeves meetings very soon, as Jen Klein told us.